This week, the Senate reconvenes in Washington, returning to a city and a nation gripped by anxiety and uncertainty. The iconic Capitol building stands as a symbol of democracy, but inside, the mood is tense. Lawmakers are gathering after days of mounting pressure, with the eyes of the country fixed on their every move. The stakes have rarely felt higher, and the sense of urgency is palpable as senators file into the chamber, aware that the decisions they make in the coming days will have far-reaching consequences for millions of Americans. They return amid a historic government shutdown, one of the longest in recent memory, which has brought much of the federal government to a standstill. Offices remain shuttered, and the usually bustling corridors of power are eerily quiet. Yet, as the lights flicker on in the Capitol at dusk, there is a faint glimmer of hope that a resolution might finally be within reach. The nation waits, hoping for signs of progress and leadership. The shutdown has left millions in a state of limbo. Federal workers, from airport security agents to park rangers, have gone weeks without pay. Many are forced to protest in the streets, while others line up at food banks or sit at kitchen tables, anxiously sorting through unpaid bills. Families across the country are feeling the strain, uncertain about when their next paycheck will come or how long they can hold on. The human cost of the political impasse grows with each passing day. As senators return to the Capitol, the pressure to act is immense. Heated discussions break out in hallways and committee rooms, with reporters crowding around lawmakers for answers. Behind closed doors, negotiations are tense and complex, as leaders from both parties search for common ground. The sense of urgency is heightened by the knowledge that every hour of inaction deepens the crisis for ordinary Americans. Adding to the tension, Election Day in key battleground states is just around the corner. Voters are heading to the polls, and the outcome of these races could shift the balance of power in Washington. Both parties know that how they handle the shutdown will be fresh in voters' minds, and the political stakes are enormous. Campaign posters and news vans crowd the streets as candidates and parties brace for the verdict of the electorate. Across the country, Americans are glued to their televisions and phones, watching the latest developments unfold. Crowds gather outside the Capitol, some in protest, others in hope. The faces in the crowd reflect a nation on edge, anxious, frustrated, but still holding out hope that their leaders will find a way forward. The sense of anticipation is almost tangible, as everyone waits to see what will happen next. Inside the Senate chamber, the divide between parties is clear. Lawmakers debate fiercely across the aisle, each side holding firm to their principles and priorities. The atmosphere is charged, with serious and determined faces reflecting the gravity of the moment. The question remains, will entrenched positions finally soften, or will partisan divisions continue to block a solution? The path to reopening the government is fraught with challenges, and the road ahead is uncertain. Yet, as the sun rises behind the Capitol dome, there is a renewed sense of hope. Federal workers dream of returning to their jobs, and some senators reach across the aisle in search of compromise. The nation waits, watching closely, hoping that this time, leaders will rise to the occasion and deliver the solutions Americans so desperately need. The U.S. government shutdown has now stretched to an astonishing 34 days, making it one of the longest in American history and putting the nation on edge as it nears a record-breaking duration. Each day that passes without a resolution adds to the uncertainty, with millions of Americans feeling the impact in their daily lives. The Capitol stands silent, its halls echoing with the absence of progress, while the rest of the country waits anxiously for a breakthrough. This prolonged standoff is more than just a political disagreement. It's a vivid illustration of the deep and growing divisions that have come to define the current era of American politics. The inability of lawmakers to find common ground has led to a breakdown in governance, with both sides blaming each other for the impasse. The chamber is filled with heated debates, finger-pointing, and a sense of frustration that seems to have no end in sight. The shutdown began when Congress failed to pass crucial funding bills, a failure that has now rippled across the nation. As negotiations stalled and tempers flared, the legislative process ground to a halt. Lawmakers walked out of sessions, unable to bridge the ideological gap that separates them, leaving the country in a state of limbo. The consequences have been far-reaching. National parks, once bustling with visitors, now stand deserted behind locked gates. Scientific research has been put on hold. Laboratories sit empty, and the doors of beloved institutions like the Smithsonian remain shuttered. The effects are felt not just in Washington, but in communities across the country. For ordinary Americans, the shutdown is a self-inflicted wound that cuts deep. Small businesses near government offices have seen their customers vanish. Federal workers are missing paychecks, struggling to make ends meet, and families are forced to make difficult choices. The economy slows, and public trust in government erodes with each passing day, as citizens grow increasingly frustrated with the lack of leadership. At the heart of this crisis is a fierce battle over healthcare policy. Both parties are deeply entrenched in their positions, unwilling to compromise on what they see as fundamental issues. Protesters take to the streets, demanding action, while politicians deliver impassioned speeches from the podium. The debate over healthcare has become a symbol of the broader ideological struggle that divides the nation. Looking back, the historical context reveals a troubling pattern. Each government shutdown seems to be more contentious than the last, with the stakes rising and the rhetoric growing sharper. Newspaper headlines chart the escalation, and timelines show how these conflicts have become almost routine, a recurring feature of American political life. The previous record holder for the longest shutdown was driven by a dispute over funding for a border wall. Now, the focus has shifted to health care, but the underlying issues remain the same: deep partisan divides and an inability to find consensus on critical national priorities. The cycle of conflict continues, with each new standoff leaving deeper scars. The question facing the nation is not just how to end this particular shutdown, but how to prevent future ones from happening. Can lawmakers find a way to work together, to put aside their differences and focus on the needs of the people? Or will the cycle of gridlock and dysfunction become the new normal in American politics? The stakes could not be higher. As the shutdown drags on, the eyes of the nation are fixed on Washington, hoping for a resolution. Families, workers, and communities across the country are waiting for signs of progress, for leaders to rise above partisanship and restore faith in the system. The coming days will test the resolve of America's leaders. Will they find a way forward, forging compromise and breaking the cycle of division? Or will the nation be forced to endure yet another chapter in the ongoing saga of political gridlock? The answer remains uncertain, but the need for leadership has never been greater. At the heart of the shutdown is a battle over healthcare subsidies under the Affordable Care Act. These subsidies, enhanced during the Biden administration, are set to expire, causing uncertainty. Without a new law, millions face skyrocketing healthcare costs. Both parties agree on the need for assistance, but differ on how to provide it. The standoff has halted government funding, with each side holding firm. The American people are caught in the middle, facing financial insecurity. The resolution of this healthcare debate is crucial to ending the shutdown. Democrats insist on extending Obamacare subsidies before reopening the government. Led by Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries, they argue that letting subsidies expire would be catastrophic. They demand action on healthcare as part of the funding negotiations. Democrats reject separate votes, insisting on tying subsidies to the funding bill. They highlight real-life stories of those benefiting from the ACA. Democrats call for President Trump's involvement to secure a deal. Their message: no government reopening without a commitment to prevent a healthcare crisis. Republicans face a dilemma: extend subsidies or push for ACA reforms. They propose extending subsidies with reforms, like new income caps. Republicans argue for market-based principles and personal responsibility in healthcare. Their platform has long included repealing and replacing Obamacare. They accuse Democrats of holding the government hostage for a partisan wish list. Republicans want separate debates on funding and healthcare policy. They believe reopening the government should precede healthcare discussions. The stalemate continues as Democrats hold firm. The path to resolution remains unclear. President Trump remains distant from shutdown negotiations, focusing on eliminating the filibuster. The White House insists on a budget before healthcare talks. Trump's call to end the filibuster is met with resistance from Senate Republicans. The filibuster encourages moderation and compromise, complicating Trump's agenda. The disconnect between Trump and congressional leaders hinders resolution. Democrats demand Trump's direct involvement, but he remains on the sidelines. The shutdown poses political risks for Trump, with low approval ratings. His leadership is questioned as Americans suffer the shutdown's consequences. The government shutdown's toll on everyday Americans is both immediate and profound. Federal workers, who once relied on steady paychecks, now find themselves staring at empty wallets and mounting bills. For many, the sudden loss of income means scrambling to cover basic expenses, from rent and utilities to groceries and gas. The uncertainty is overwhelming as families wonder how long they can stretch their savings, or if they'll have to dip into retirement funds just to get by. The emotional strain is visible on the faces of those who never imagined they'd be in this position, forced to make impossible choices as the days drag on. Across the country, families are forced to make tough decisions between essentials like food, housing, and healthcare. Parents are skipping meals so their children can eat, and some are falling behind on rent, facing the very real threat of eviction. The stress of not knowing whether they'll have a roof over their heads or enough food on the table is taking a heavy toll on mental health. For many, the shutdown has turned daily life into a constant balancing act, with every dollar scrutinized and every purchase weighed against urgent needs. As paychecks stop, many Americans are turning to food banks and pantries for the first time in their lives. These once proud workers and families now find themselves waiting in long lines, humbled by the experience of asking for help. Food banks, already stretched thin, are seeing record demand, with shelves emptying faster than they can be restocked. Volunteers work tirelessly to meet the need, but the surge in first-time visitors is a stark reminder of how quickly financial security can unravel. Vulnerable populations are hit especially hard. Seniors on fixed incomes, single parents, and low-income families rely on programs like SNAP to put food on the table. But with the shutdown, SNAP funding is running out, leaving many to wonder how they'll feed their families in the weeks ahead. The anxiety is palpable as people check their balances, hoping for relief that may not come. In a desperate attempt to keep families afloat, the USDA has tapped into emergency funds, managing to pay out only half of November's SNAP benefits. This stopgap measure offers some relief, but it's far from enough. The uncertainty about future payments leaves millions in limbo, unsure how they'll make ends meet if the shutdown drags on. Parents are struggling to feed their children, with many turning to the Women, Infants, and Children Program, or WIC, for help. Demand for WIC services has surged, overwhelming offices and leaving families waiting for assistance. For some, the only meals their children receive come from these vital programs, making the threat of funding cuts even more frightening. The effects of the shutdown ripple far beyond the kitchen table. At airports, the FAA reports critical staffing shortages, leading to longer security lines and widespread flight delays. Air traffic controllers and safety inspectors are working without pay, raising concerns about fatigue and safety in the skies. The Transportation Secretary has issued a stark warning. If safety is compromised, flights could be grounded nationwide. The threat of a paralyzed air travel system looms, adding another layer of anxiety for travelers and workers alike. For millions, the shutdown's real-world cost is measured in financial hardship and relentless anxiety. Bank accounts are drained, bills pile up, and the fear of foreclosure or eviction grows with each passing day. The emotional burden is immense, as families struggle to maintain hope in the face of mounting uncertainty. The impact is felt not just by federal workers, but by small businesses, contractors, and entire communities. Local economies suffer as spending drops, and workers across industries worry about their jobs and futures. The ripple effects of the shutdown touch every corner of the nation, leaving no one truly untouched. Ultimately, the story of this shutdown is one of political failure and profound human suffering. As leaders in Washington remain deadlocked, it's ordinary Americans who bear the brunt, struggling to get by, hoping for an end, and wondering how much longer they can hold on. Despite public stalemate, behind-the-scenes talks offer hope for a solution. Bipartisan discussions increase, with lawmakers seeking compromise. The Problem Solvers Caucus proposes a plan extending ACA credits with income caps. This compromise could provide political cover for both parties. The path to passing a deal is fraught with obstacles. Success depends on President Trump's willingness to endorse it. These talks represent the best hope for ending the shutdown. The shutdown, nearing a record duration, affects all Americans. It highlights a failure of leadership and erodes trust in governance. The shutdown's economic impact is widespread, affecting businesses and workers. It reveals the fragility of the social safety net. Essential services depend on a functioning government. The shutdown forces difficult questions about national priorities. It tests our democracy and calls for leadership and compromise. The stakes are about the nation's health and stability, affecting us all.